Hey there, it's Celebrity, and today I'm going to share with you how to crochet this granny square sweater with flare sleeves. And now these flare sleeves may look familiar for those of you who are subscribed to me and watched my video from last year of how to make this flare sleeve bolero, because they are the exact same sleeves. I just repurposed them for the sweater because, to be honest, I don't really wear boleros, so I'm like, I'm going to reuse these sleeves because I love them, but for a different project. So in this video, I'm going to share with you bits and pieces of that tutorial. However, if you do need the full in-depth tutorial how to make these sleeves, they'll be linked in the description box below via the tutorial on how to make the flare sleeve a bolero. And in addition to the sleeves, of course, I'm going to show you how to make the rest of the sweater. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. For this project, I'm using size 4 yarn from the brand Red Heart, and if you want to know where you could purchase your very own yarn, I will leave my Amazon affiliate links in the description box below so you can buy them from there. And this is 100% acrylic. I am also using a size 5mm hook, and I will leave a link to the hook I'm using in the description box down below as well. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Also, just to let you know, you can, of course, make this whatever color you want. It doesn't have to be black, but because it is the spooky season and I want to make it like witchy and Halloweeny, I am using the color black. So the first thing that you're going to do is grab your yarn and create a slip knot. Now, if you're a complete beginner to crochet, I do have a Crocheting for Beginners video linked in the description box below. Wrap around, say, your wrist. Obviously, it's not going to fit the rest of your arm unless, of course, your entire arm is the same width as your wrist, which for most of us, that's not the case. So what you want to do is, again, find the widest part of your arm and then make sure that you're able to wrap this around. Now, if you want it more loose, then make more chains. If you want it like snug around your arm, then make it so that it wraps around like this snugly, but again, at the widest part of your arm. So of course, everybody's going to chain a different number of chains because everyone has different sized arms. But if you're curious, I chained 55 chains. And from here, once you're done chaining a chain that is wide enough to wrap around the widest part of your arm, then you're going to take the two ends of the chain, bring them together, and then attach them with a slip stitch. And a slip stitch is through the stitch, yarn over, and then through both of the stitches, and now it's nice and attached, and now it is a round project. Now from here, we're going to start with the pattern that we're essentially going to use for like 95% of this project. So from here, you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Then you're going to yarn over, go through that same stitch that you just made those 3 chains in. Then you're going to yarn over, go back through that stitch, yarn over through 1 loop that's on your hook, then yarn over through 2 loops that are on your hook, then yarn over through the last 2 loops. Then you're going to chain 1, yarn over, go through the same exact opening, yarn over, go through that opening, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. One more time, yarn over through that same opening, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. And what you've created here is a little open shell stitch is what I call. I don't know what it's actually called, but it kind of looks like an open shell stitch. And what it is essentially 2 triple crochets, then a chain 1 in between, then 2 triple crochets all inside of 1 stitch. Now, of course, because we started the very first row, one of the triple crochets is just a chain 3, and that served as one of them. But from here on end, this is what an open shell stitch is going to consist of: 2 triple crochets, then a chain, then 2 triple crochets inside of the same exact stitch. And then in between, we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, go into that 4th stitch, and then create another open shell stitch. So 1 triple crochet, followed by another triple crochet, yarn over through the stitch, through 1 loop, through 2 loops, through the last 2 loops, then a chain 1, then go into the same stitch, create another 2 triple crochets, so it's 1, and then another 1, And this is what the project should look like. You're going to do that all around the chain that you created. So then it's going to be chain 1, then you're going to skip 3 stitches, go into that 4th stitch, yarn over, go through that stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Yarn over into the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Chain 1, into the same stitch, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. Voila! You're just going to continue doing that all around. So then from here, chain 1, skip 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, go into that 4th stitch, then continue making your open shell stitches, and I will meet you at the end. Okay, so I went ahead and followed that pattern all throughout the chain here, and this is what the project looks like so far. Now I did chain 1, and instead of making a new open shell stitch, I'm just going to slip stitch into the first open shell stitch of that row to complete the row, and this is what it looks like. So from here, we're going to build on top of the open shell stitches with more open shell stitches until the sleeve is long enough to cover your entire arm. So again, right now it should be wide enough to fit into the widest part of your arm, and eventually you're just going to make it longer and longer and longer, and once you get to the bottom, it's going to be this wide, and that's exactly what we want. We want bell sleeves, so it's going to work out great. So from here, we're going to chain 1, then go into the opening of the open shell stitch with another open shell stitch. So instead of going into actual stitches, you're just going to go into the opening of the previous row's open shell stitch. So yarn over through the opening, yarn over back through the opening, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Then you're going to chain 1, yarn over, go through the same opening, and create 2 more triple crochets, and voila! You got 2 open shell stitches layered on top of each other, and this is what that looks like. And from here, we're just going to continue on with the pattern, chain 1 in between, and then you're going to reach on over to the next opening of the next open shell stitch and create another open shell stitch on top of that, and that again is consisted of 2 triple crochets, then a chain in between, and then 2 triple crochets all in the same opening, and that's what that looks like. And you're going to do that all around and around and around and around until it gets wider and wider and wider, or I guess taller and taller. This is essentially what your sleeve is going to be. So you're just going to continue with this pattern until it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it covers your entire arm. Until we get to the very end, of course, and then we're going to add a little detail. But yeah, chain 1, then go into that next opening and create your next open shell stitch, like so. So yeah, you're just going to keep going in circles, going into every single opening of every single open shell stitch of the previous row, and create another open shell stitch on top of it. And I'll let you know what it looks like after a few more rows. So this is what the project looks like after quite a few more rows of me following that same exact pattern. Again, if you want the full in-depth tutorial on how I made these sleeves and need more like progress shots, want more details on exactly everything that I'm doing, because I do end up making it even more flared at the bottom, then go ahead and watch my full tutorial linked in the description box below. But so that this video isn't like an hour long, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end where I add the trim details and then move on to the next part of the sweater. Okay, so I have officially finished the length of my sleeve, so now when I try it on, it fits from my shoulder to my wrist. And I have completed a total of 39 rows, if you're wondering. Also, you can tell where I added those extra open shell stitches. So it was just the normal pattern all the way up to right here, and then I increased, and now the project is more flared towards the bottom. But if you don't want this, you don't have to increase. But on the other hand, if you want it to flare out even more, then add more open shell stitches than I did. But this is just a little bit of a flare that I wanted for my bell sleeve. Now you can just end it here if you like the way it looks, but I kind of wanted to add a little bit of like a spike detailing on the trim, so this is how I made that. Okay, so from where I left off, I'm not going to chain anything. I'm going to go directly into the next stitch. You know how normally we make our open shell stitch within the opening of the previous row's open shell stitch? Well, now we're actually going to go on top of that open shell stitch, and we're going to create a double crochet within the previous row's, how do I explain that? It's this side of the open shell stitch, where normally we would only work in the opening of it. Well, now we're working on top of it, and we're going to create a double crochet. And then from here, we're going to go into this opening that's in between the open shell stitches, and we're going to create 3 double crochets inside of that opening. And a double crochet is yarn over through the opening, yarn over, back through the opening, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Yarn over through the opening, yarn over, back through the opening, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. And this is what it should look like. And the reason I added this extra double crochet right after we finished the last open shell stitch is to make it more solid, because if I had skipped over that, it would have been like there would have been a gap, and I don't want that. But if you don't mind it, you don't have to add this extra one. But again, I want that to be there so it could be as solid as possible. My idea is to make a row of like solid stitches, so that is why I am also going to go into this stitch right here. So right before we go into the opening of the open shell stitch as we normally do, we are going to make sure that we make a double crochet in that stitch going up to the opening, and then once we get into the actual opening, we're going to create a scallop. And to create a scallop, it's very similar to an open shell stitch, except there's just no chain 1 in between. It's just a solid 5 triple crochets inside of this opening within the open shell stitch. And again, triple crochet, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and yarn over through the last 2 loops. Yarn over through that same opening, yarn over back through that opening, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. And you're going to create a total of 5 of these in the same exact opening. And once you do that, I'll show you what it looks like compared to the open shell stitches that we've been making this whole time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So this is what it looks like compared to the open shell stitch. It's like a little scallop right here, a little hill that we're creating. So we're going to be making a bunch of these throughout the entire row, and then for the second row of the trim, we're going to make this into a point. So right now we're just making the base of it, and then once we go around for that second row, we're going to make it pointy. So from here, again, we're going to go into that stitch right here and make a double crochet just so that everything is nice and solid and there's no giant gaps in between. There's still going to be some gaps, but that's okay. It's not like giant gaps like the rest of the project. So from here, going to go into the opening that's in between the open shell stitches, and we're going to make 3 double crochets within that opening. Voila. I guess if you want it more solid, you could add more double crochets. See if I add 1 more double crochet into that opening, it actually covers it more than on this side. So yeah, there's a little gap right here, but I guess there's also a gap right here. 3 or 4 I think either would work, so totally up to you. I think I'm just gonna stick with 3. And then from here, we're gonna reach on over to the open shell stitch and create 5 triple crochets inside of this opening here to create our little scallop. And again, if you want the scallop to be even bigger, you just add more stitches, add more triple crochets inside of this one opening. How many was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So this is what the new pattern is for this row. So once you reach back to your very first scallop that you made, then I will show you what the last step is. Okay, so I finished up that row of making the scallops, and this is what it looks like from this angle. You can see all the little scallops and stuff. Okay, so now that we know how to make the sleeve, again, if you need a more in-depth tutorial, that is linked in the description box down below. But now that you've made your sleeve, you go ahead and follow those exact same steps and make a whole other one, because you're going to need 2 of these. And after you've made your sleeves, you're going to move on to making your granny squares, and you're going to be making quite a few of these. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to do is grab your yarn and make a slip knot. Then from that slip knot, you're going to chain 2. So, okay, make a slip knot. And then you're going to chain 2. So, I'm trying to do this in real time. So, 1 and 2. Then you're going to go into that very first chain that you created and make a single crochet. All right, so then you're left with a little cluster, right? And then from that little cluster, you're going to find the center stitch. Really, I just kind of stab my hook and find a stitch I could go into. And then from there, I'm going to make 12 double crochets. Yes, 12 double crochets inside of this one stitch in the center of this little cluster that's meant to be a circle. Also, if you know how to make a magic ring, I would highly suggest that you make a magic ring and then make the 12 double crochets inside of that magic ring. I feel like it'll be a little bit cleaner, but for me, I struggle to make the magic ring. I don't know why, but this is how I make my circular projects, by the 2 chains and then the little cluster. But if that doesn't work for you, again, totally use a magic ring. But yeah, I'm just going to do the exact same center stitch and making 12 total double crochets. And if you forgot what a double crochet is, it is yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 2 loops, then yarn over through the last 2 loops. And you just keep making 12 of them inside of that same exact stitch, going around in a circle until you've again crocheted 12 double crochets. And after you've made your 12th one, you're going to complete this row or complete this circle with a slip stitch into the very first double crochet that you made in this row. And after that, then you are completely done with the very first row, and this is going to serve as the core of our granny square. So from here, you're going to chain 2, and then in that same exact stitch that you chain 2 in, you're going to make a modified extended double crochet. And I'll go ahead and let you know exactly what I just did right here in the next one. So you're going to make 3 total. So I made the first cluster. Now I'm going to chain 2. So 1 and 2. Go into the next stitch by yarning over, then through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop only, then yarn over through 2 loops only, and then I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to yarn over, go into the exact same stitch, and do the exact same thing, just leave it at the end, and then make 1 more, yarn over through a stitch, yarn over back through a stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, and then this is where I messed up, because then I was supposed to go through all of the loops right here, but I didn't, and now I'm going through all the loops, and that's confusing. So the next one is going to be perfect, I promise. So chain 2, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, then yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, then yarn over through the stitch, yarn over through back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through all 4 loops left on your hook. Oh, okay, one more time. Chain 2, go into the stitch, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through 1 loop, yarn over through 2 loops, then yarn over through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, yarn over through all four loops left on your hook, chain two, go into the next stitch, yarn over through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, then yarn over through the same stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, then yarn over through the same stitch yet again, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through two loops, then yarn over and through all four loops left on your hook. And that's how you make the little clusters, and you're going to make 12 of them, one for each double crochet that you made in the previous row. And that is the pattern for this entire row here. So you're going to go all around, go into every single one of the stitches and create those clusters of a half double crochets, or rather extended double crochets, but in that modified way so that the clusters are all together at the end. So you make 3 of them, but you don't complete them until all 3 are done, and then that's when you yarn over and go through all of the loops to create the little cluster. And you're just going to go all around following the exact same pattern until you reach the end. And once you reach the end, you're going to complete the row by slip stitching into the very first extended double crochet that you created for that row, and that's what the project should look like so far. So again, I'm finishing up the very last cluster here, so the 12th cluster of this row, and because I have made a total of 12, one for each double crochet made in the previous row, I'm now going to complete this row by chaining 2, then slip stitching into the very first extended double crochet that I made for this row. And this is what the project looks like so far with 2 rows here. And now we're going to switch things up again. For the next row, we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to make a corner piece. So we're going to start making these corners to turn this round project into a square one. And we're going to do that by making 3 extended double crochets in a row inside of that one opening. And after you made your 3 extended double crochets inside of that one opening, you're going to chain 2 and then make 3 more extended double crochets inside of that same opening. And we're going to make the extended double crochets to the end. So yarn over through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. So different than the previous clusters that we made, we're just making 3 extended double crochets separately but together, you know what I mean, instead of having to actually combine them into a cluster like we did in the previous row. And then from here we're going to make 3 double crochets in the various spaces in between the next corner piece that we're going to make. So make 3 double crochets in the next few stitches, and then in the next opening after that you're going to make another corner piece, which is again 3 extended double crochets followed by 2 chains. So this is my second extended double crochet, and then my third extended double crochet, 2 chains, and then make 3 extended double crochets in that same opening right after the 2 chains. And that's how you make your corner pieces. So yarn over through the stitch, yarn over back through the stitch, yarn over through one loop, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through the last 2 loops. And then you're going to chain 1, make 3 double crochets in the next 3 stitches, and then you're going to reach on over to the next opening and make another corner piece. So this is my third double crochet, and now I'm going to reach on over to the next opening, or chain 1, reach on over to the next opening, and then make another corner piece made up of 3 extended double crochets, one right after another in that same opening, and then a chain 2, 1, 2, and then 3 extended double crochets inside of the same opening. So this is going to be my third one, and I've just made my third corner piece. I'm going to chain 1, then make 3 double crochets in the next upcoming stitches until I reach the next opening. And once I reach that next opening, I'm going to chain 1 and then make my last corner piece the exact same way with 3 extended double crochets inside of that same opening, followed by 2 chains. So those 3 extended double crochets, then 2 chains, 1, 2, and then another 3 extended double crochets inside of that same opening. And after I've completed my final corner piece, I'm going to make those 3 double crochets in between. And once I reach the very first corner piece that I made for this row, then I'm going to slip stitch into that first stitch that I made and complete that row. So here I am going to slip stitch into that stitch, and that is the square. Woo! And now the hardest part is over. Really forming it is the hardest part, and then after that you just grow on top of it, and you're basically just doing the same thing over again. So every time you reach a corner piece, you're going to make 3 double crochets and then 2 chains and then 3 double crochets afterward. And the reason why I switched to all just double crochets from now on is because I want it to be more uniform. And the reason why I use extended double crochets for the corner pieces in the previous row is just because I wanted the corners to be like longer and pointier than the rest of the project, and that's just a preference thing. You could have just totally used double crochet the entire time, but I'd use extended double crochet for the corner pieces. So every time you reach a corner piece, you're going to continue with that corner, and then every time you reach an opening, you're going to make 3 double crochets inside of that same opening, and then you're going to chain 1 and then reach over to the corner piece and then create another corner piece on top of the previous row's corner piece by again making 3 double crochets followed by 2 chains, followed by another 3 double crochets, those 2 chains, and now I'm making 3 double crochets inside of that same opening to complete my corner piece. Then I'm going to chain 1, reach on over to the next opening and make 3 double crochets inside of that one opening. And then I'm going to chain 1, make 3 double crochets inside of the next opening, and then repeat that pattern all around the square until I reach the very first stitch that I created in that row, and then I slip stitch into it to complete that row. And this is what the project looks like. From here you could decide how many rows you want to add on to it to make it bigger and bigger, and when you do add on to it, all you have to do is the exact same pattern as before. Every time you reach a corner piece, you're going to make 3 double crochets followed by 2 chains and then another 3 double crochets inside of that same opening. And then for the body of the square, every time you reach the opening in the middle, you're just going to make 3 double crochets inside of those openings, then chain 1, reach on over to the next opening and make 3 double crochets, and so on and so forth until you reach the corner piece. Then you make another corner piece on top of the previous row's corner piece, and so on and so forth. And that's pretty much the pattern. You could continue making rows and rows of that until you're happy with the size of your square. For me, I just added another row of this for all my squares, and that's how large my squares are, if you're wondering. But of course, if you want to make each square bigger, you just go ahead and continue making them bigger and bigger, make more rows of this pattern. But this is what my squares look like, and I had to make a total of 12 of these squares to make a sweater of my size, which I would probably consider it's a size small. So for reference, that's about the size sweater that I made. So in addition to the squares and the sleeves, you're also going to need to make a back piece. Now you can make the back piece the exact same way with the squares and just place them the way that I did. Essentially what you need to make is this H shape. And I didn't really want to make more squares because those things take forever, so I just went with this solid back piece. And all I did was chain 70 chains and then make rows and rows and rows of double crochets until the body fit from my hips to my collarbone. And then once I put it against my body and it fit from my hips to my collarbone, I made these pieces on the side right here, and all I did was go from one side to like the middle right here where you can see where I ended, and I just crocheted in that area, and then on the other side I just crocheted in that area and left the middle like empty, like I just didn't crochet in those spots. And that's how I made the H shape. But again, you could just make them out of squares as well. And after you've made all of your squares, you're going to need to attach them together. And to attach them, all you need to do is grab your squares, align them to however you want them to be attached, and then just slip stitch them together. Grab 2 granny squares and put them together, making sure that they're both facing inside out. So there's going to be one side where you want it to actually show in the front of your sweater, and then the other side is going to be like the back. So make sure that the back sides are facing you when you're attaching them together via the slip stitch. And then grab your yarn and create slip stitches all along the sides of the granny squares to where you want them to be attached. And that's essentially it. You're going to have to be doing that multiple times for all of the squares for the front, and if you decide to also make squares in the back, then also, you know, attach all the squares together in the back. So that's all I do. I just slip stitch them together, making sure that the back side is facing me wherever I'm attaching them. That way the front side can look nice and clean, and that's what the front side looks like, and that's what it looks like when it's attached. And now this is the back side. I'm just going to continue attaching all of these squares together. Again, making sure that they're all facing the right way, because I know it could get a little bit confusing. But yeah, that's essentially all I'm doing, just slip stitching all of the pieces together to form this H shape. Okay, so I've attached a few of them together, and this is what it looks like. And I'm just going to continue attaching the rest together, and you could use whatever method you want to attach them. You could attach 3 at a time, you could attach them like the way I'm doing, just going one by one and making the H shape. But as long as they're all attached together and again are forming this shape, then you're good to go. Next up is attaching everything else. So you're going to need a back piece, a front piece with the granny squares, maybe both of them, both front and back with granny squares, whatever, up to you. Mine is a solid piece, and then 2 sleeves. And what we're going to do is take the solid piece and attach that to the sleeve right here, making sure that you just attach the back of the sleeve to the back of the sweater. And then we're going to grab the front piece and attach it not only to the back piece but also to the sleeve, but just the front of the sleeve, so that there's a hole for you to put your arm in. And the way we're going to attach everything is the exact same way with a slip stitch, so be sure that you align everything to where you want it to be attached to, and then slip stitch everything together, making sure that the sweater is inside out when you're slip stitching it together, because again, you don't want the stitching to show. So you're attaching the front piece and the back piece at the very top, the sleeve, as well as the front piece and the back piece at the bottom, so everything else is going to stay open. The sleeves are going to stay open, this neck hole is going to stay open, and the bottom is going to stay open, so you could actually like wear it properly, but everything else needs to be attached together. Also, to close up this neck opening I have here, I decided to add some more rows of the 3 double crochets that we did for the rest of the granny squares, where you go in between the openings and you make 3 double crochets, and then, you know, you chain 1 and blah blah blah. So I continued with that, so that way I could kind of close up this gap. And also, in order to make it rounder as opposed to continuing the square shape, I made 5 double crochets inside of the corner of the project where it kind of dips and makes it more square. I wanted to fill that out with a cluster of double crochet, and then the rest is going to be the regular, you know, granny square style. That way it could fill out the space right here and round it out. I know that doesn't really make any sense, but hopefully after a couple rows you'll be able to understand it a little bit better. So I essentially made kind of like a corner piece inside of that corner, but that way it could fill it out. I feel like that made it more confusing. Anyway, so let me just go ahead and show you what it looks like after 1 row. This is what it looks like after 1 row. See how it's kind of rounded out as opposed to the other side, which is very pointed. So again, at that corner, I made a cluster of double crochets to fill out that spot. And eventually, as I continue making more and more rows of this pattern and decreasing every so often, that way it could get smaller and smaller as I get closer to my neck, then it's going to make more sense and look better. I know it's so confusing, I had to draw it out for you. So this is the neck portion of the project, right? I made like 6 double crochets right here in this corner, and then I chained 1, made 3 double crochets, chain 1, made 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets, then chain 1 to go up, chain 1 to go to the side, and then in each opening I made 3 double crochets and chain 1, 3 double crochets until I reach the corner piece right here. Then I'm just going to continue making more double crochets until the next opening right here. So every time I reach the corner, I make more than 3 double crochets to kind of round it out. So here I am at the other corner, making 6 double crochets, and then continuing with a pattern of 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets, then chain 1, go to the next opening, 3 double crochets, chain 1, 3 double crochets, chain 1. And now that I'm approaching the corner, I'm just going to continue making a bunch of double crochets to round out this corner, and then I'm going to chain 1 and then continue with the pattern of making the 3 double crochets inside of each opening until I reach the corner again, and then I'm just going to continue making double crochets, double crochet, double crochet all the way up here. And then once I reach the upper parts of the project, then I'm going to continue with my 3 double crochet pattern, and so on and so forth until the project fits you the way that you want. As you can see, because we did that with the corner, it's now more of a circular piece as opposed to a square because we rounded out those corners. Hopefully that helped at least a little bit. But yeah, that's essentially what I do to round out the corner and then also make more coverage on my neck. And once you're done with the neck detailing and you're happy with how it fits, then you could go ahead and continue attaching all of the pieces together like I mentioned before, the front piece and the back piece and the sleeves. And once everything is attached together, then you're completely done with your sweater. So congratulations, you've crocheted yourself a granny square flare sleeve sweater. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you so much for watching. I know that this wasn't like the most straightforward tutorial ever, but I hope you have an idea of how to recreate this sweater yourself. I may want to recreate a similar one in a different color since I know this yarn is super hard to see. But go ahead and let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. I at least want to share a dedicated tutorial on how to make the granny squares with a different color. That way you could see it a little bit better. But yeah, again, just let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much again for watching. If you love crochet, please go ahead and check out the rest of my channel. I have so many tutorials ranging from beginner-friendly tutorials to more advanced like this one and crochet with me's and so much more. So go ahead and check it out. Also follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Both are at Crystal Everdeen. It's a fun time and I'd love to see you there. Don't forget to click that red subscribe button if you have not already so I can see you next time. Bye and have a magical day.